Recently, I had a friend say to me, you know, I get this whole adoption thing, but my husband says adoption, it just isn't natural. And I turned to her and I said, he's right. It isn't. It's divine. We're here today to talk about a radical, countercultural, God-shaped idea that the church has been tasked to look after the orphan. We developed a ministry out of an example of a church that I grew up in that seemed to have something within the church that I hadn't seen in any other church that I had gone to. It was a relatively simple church, but they had what I called the culture of adoption within that church. They had over 100 adopted kids in a church of about 800 people. And I wrestled with God about this because I wanted to understand, why did this church have something that other churches didn't seem to have? I created a group of pillars of ministry, and my husband and I developed what we like to call a couch ministry, where we would invite families to come and we would be willing to share our experience of our own adoption of our child, Lily at the time. And then out of that couch ministry, we developed a local ministry in our church to have a broader reach. Out of that, we started to have pastors approach us and say, please help us to develop something in our church. So we did that. We developed a not-for-profit that goes out and creates and supports orphan-focused ministries in the Northeast. We take action on behalf of orphaned and abandoned children, and we develop a culture and spirit of adoption within the church. I am not an expert in much, but this I know. If you take the passions already seated in any church and attach to that an orphan focus, you can develop a ministry and a heart within the church and create a culture of adoption. Here are the pillars. We edify and raise awareness within the church by bringing truth to the church and allow the church to become aware of the realities of millions of children in the world. We provide fellowship, seminars, and growth groups for adoptive children and their families, and we create opportunities for connection. We mentor through education, recruitment, and providing financial support for our families wishing to bring a child into their homes via adoption and foster care. We get into the pit with our families. We're prepared for the fact that we're going to face crisis pregnancies and infertility and loss, and we are willing to journey through this and other terribly difficult situations on behalf of the folks in our church. We get messy. We partner with trusted organizations. We partner with folks inside our church, our community, outside. I partner with secular, Christian. If this is your heart, I partner. I get in there with folks so that I can advocate on behalf of families in my church. And we rally, most importantly. We create a culture of adoption by engaging the whole church to look after the orphan. The culture of adoption is a whole church initiative. It isn't just for adoptive families. It is the biblical mandate that is for every Christian to look after the orphan. From family preservation to anti-trafficking to advocating against trafficking to missions. There is information and accessibility out there to plug folks into your church, into these areas. The pillars we developed, I like to say, bring about a right thinking toward orphan care. But what does good ministry look like? When we're talking about good ministry, we are blessed to have the best example in the actions of Christ. Mark 6 says that Jesus landed and he saw a large crowd and he had compassion on them because they were like sheep without a shepherd, so he began teaching them many things. Matthew 9 says Jesus saw the crowds and he had compassion on them because they were harassed and helpless, like sheep without a shepherd. Matthew 14 says when Jesus saw the crowds, he had compassion on them and healed the sick and lame. When Jesus ministers, he sees, he is moved to compassion, and he takes action. The biblical definition of that word, see, actually means a willingness to see and become aware. When we're talking about being moved to compassion, the biblical definition there actually means to be moved to your bowels. Church, let it hurt. This should settle in on you today, what you're seeing. And when we take action, We see that Christ takes action in ways that meets the physical need. He teaches, he saves from suffering, he prays, he heals, he feeds the hungry, he comforts, he restores the soul, he changes lives, he meets the physical need, and then he addresses the spiritual need. So how are we going to translate this into ministry, church? We must have a willingness to see and understand what it takes to combat the orphan crisis and create a right thinking within our church families that is based on truth. We must be moved to compassion. There is a difference between pity and true compassion. And we must then allow that to compel us to take action. From teaching to healing to feeding, Jesus always takes action. All three steps are necessary for effectively looking after the orphan. These steps, Jesus' steps, should be our guide. Partnered with pillars, we create a culture of adoption and a roadmap for how we should minister. In the midst of whatever we are going through, Jesus asks for more. To look to serve the lost and lonely, to seek and save those who are lost. I recently heard a pastor say, Jesus isn't looking for slaves. He's looking for sons and daughters to take over the family business. I have decided to work for that family business. I am allowing this today to break me. And I'm asking you to let it break you and to compel us all into taking action. Thank you.